This talk has been slightly tweaked. So the abstract may mention things like Gradle. You're going to see where I've taken out some of the specifics to make it general. And in fact, the topic is very general. So how many people here, hey, how many of you are developers? Okay, good. That's a good start. So I work for this company now called Sonotype. I used to work for IBM and I used to work for Red Hat, but now I work for Sonotype, and it's a bit squidged, but there we go. I work for Sonotype, and when I ask people, hey, have you ever heard of us? Most people go, nope. But we're actually the people that provide Maven Central. If you're a Java developer, we're the people who provide Maven Central to you. And maybe you've heard some of the other things we use, like Nexus and others. We produce a bunch of stuff to help make developers' life more security friendly, right? And we've done a bunch of this stuff because we work in open source projects, because we have open source roots. The people that created the project, created Sonotype, are the same people who created Maven Central and also created Apache Maven, the tool that you may be using as Java developer. Right? And I mention that just because whenever I say Sonotype, people go, I don't know who you are. But when I say Maven Central, they go, oh, no, we know who you are. So that's where I come from. But that's not what's important. What's important is this topic, 10x developers. So you're a developer, and you've all met them, right? You've met that person who just seems to be more productive, just seems to be better in whatever better means, gets more stuff to happen, right? Fixes more bugs, runs more tests, whatever it is, there's always that person who does it all. Right? And we go, oh, they're superheroes. They're amazing, they have capes, they fly, they do all this stuff. And it's like, well, what can we do to be more like them? Because as you'll see at the back end of this talk, it's becoming really, really important that as developers, we are more productive and we're more focused. So I'm going to go through the basic pieces that make up what you might consider to be a 10x developer and talk about how you can apply that yourself. Right. So of course, this is the goal. We'd all like to be 10x developers, okay? But let's talk about what that means, okay? So does it mean writing 10 times the amount of code? No, right? Does it mean fixing 10 times the bugs? No, right? Does it mean working 800 hours a week? And I hope nobody in this room is working 800 hours a week. Are there 800 hours in a week? I don't know. But you get the idea. Is that what 10x is? They just do 10x more than everybody else? No. It's not about those things, right? It's not about them having secret identities. I only work alone. So you will have met developers who go, yeah, I'll do it. It's just me, go away. Okay, that's not a 10x developer, right? Do they have special powers? We've all met the developer who said, oh, well, I rewrote that over the weekend. I was bored and I did this. That's not a 10x developer either. They are anti-patterns. That's not what we're looking for. So, given the nice introduction, it says, I've been around a bit, okay? And I've done all this stuff. And all the time that I've been doing this, well, I missed a thing, okay? And most of that has been in the Java space, okay? So I've done loads of Java stuff, right? And in all that time, so I've been doing this, I don't know, 25, 30 years. Been writing code, doing all stuff. And all that time, a handful of people I can point to and go, that's a 10x developer. So these people are rare. Okay? So the question is, what is one? And how can you be like it? Okay? Oh, by the way, they're not all developers. Some of the 10x developers don't write code. They might write tests. They may do performance. They could do other things, but they're technical, right? The important thing is, none of them were superheroes. None of them just had this magic. It was a thing they learned. Some were better at learning it than others. they were all professional. They looked at the job they were doing and they went, how do I make this happen most effectively? They were very, and are very focused people. Now, being one of these is hard, right? It takes time because there's so many things you could do as a developer, and you're likely to do the wrong thing because you're not thinking the right way. The first thing you need to start looking around is, if you want to be one of these superheroes, well, actually, if you want to be a 10x developer of the right type, you start looking at the role models around you. Who do you work with? What role models do you exhibit? You certainly don't want the people who are going to stand up and say, I worked through the night. That's not a great role model. That's an anti-pattern, right? They're just putting loads of effort in. And you know the consequences of these people writing code through the night. You know the amount of bugs and things that are going to come out of it are going to be large. So it's not a good pattern. The pattern starts with you. And I love this little one. It says, let me write this code in one line. So year 0, now. This is you going, I'm going to show I'm clever. But actually, you want year X, where it says, let me write this code so that future me can easily understand it. It's that beginning to flip around and think not about you, but about the team, and the team include future you. Right? What can I do to make the team productive? Okay. So are there particular characteristics of how 10x developers work? There are some. Right? I'll show you a few, right? Really simple things, right? But it's got the flavor. So one of the things when you talk to these 10x developers, you go, what do you do? Well, everything goes under change control. They have local Git repos for their own stuff, for scripts and things they're not going to share, for doc, you name it. And many of them will have a GitHub repo, a Git repo, not a GitHub repo, a Git repo locally, because they can always wind back. One of the things that you see 10x developers doing is making sure they don't lose things. And that when they try experiments, it doesn't work, they know how to roll back and try something else they've tried. And they keep it structured. So they use Git. Quite a lot of them use Git for it. Another thing they have is their own little CI/CD systems. They build things. Because they understand that you need to have certainty in what you do from the moment you start. So GitHub, Git's repos give you control, give you the ability to roll back and look at things. Having your own little Jenkins thing, you can use in Docker, you can have it running. You start to prove the process. And we'll talk about that in a minute, right? They're not a big Jenkins setup, it's the principle of I can always build my code, not on the command line, not Maven package, but with a tool that I expect some type of that tool to be used. They're going to look ahead and making sure that they catch those issues up front. They don't wait until they've deployed and then find a load of problems. They build it into their thought process, and as they write code, they have it to hand. Then, another characteristic is whenever something new turns up, they explore it. One of the things you'll find is if you were to ask a 10x developer, what's the difference between curl and wget? They could tell you. I bet most of you guys in this room couldn't tell me what the difference was, right? Or what the value is of one tool or the other and all the details. They can. That's the sort of thing they do. They look at a tool and they go, what can I do with this tool? How does it work? Let's try it, right? How do I get things to happen? How do I go from my code to delivery? Is it Amazon? Right, what are the basics for Amazon? I don't even have a project. I don't have particular code. I have hello world, the simplest thing. Prove the process. Find the facts. Look for the detail, right? Don't guess. Prove it. And prove it with the simplest thing that works. Because that's a solid foundation. Right. And then you break it. What happens if I put code in that doesn't compile? How far would it get? What happens if I do something that breaks my Amazon deployment? Why do I want to do that? Because I want to check under my control what the errors look like. What feedback do I get? Because it's much better to do that now than it is to wait for it to go wrong in production. So they exercise these things now in controlled manners to prove they understand. And so now they've got an understanding that you might not have got because you've been writing the code and not thinking of the bigger picture. And these guys are thinking about the long term. Right? And then with all these tools, they spend time exploring the tools, right? And they'll write tests for these things. Now, some developers will tell you, or some development managers will tell you, I don't want you to write tests for somebody else's code. But the fact is, you should write tests to prove the behavior of the code, the tools you're using, whether it's open source projects, dependencies, APIs. They write tests. They look for those sharp edges where things don't quite work the way you expected. They build in clarity and certainty into their day-to-day lives. I know how this works because I've shown it to myself. I've proven it. Right? They document everything they find in a GitHub repo, maybe, and they read the fine print. They go read the tools and go, what does it do? What does it say it does? What does it not do? Right? Because they are building a knowledge base for themselves, an experience base that they can build on. Right? And now, we're getting to the point of going, okay, now we can build the first prototype. We've understood how things connect. We've got a basic delivery process. What do we do next? Well, let's put some code in. Right, write codes and tests. Codes and tests. As a developer, you may historically begrudge writing tests, but as a 10x developer, if you write the right tests, it's the best thing you could ever do. Right? The important bit, the subtlety here, is that tests become, I have a jelly mold here, but you know, you have a mold of something. Your tests become a sort of a shell, a shape around your code. The more tests you have, the more you can show that your code isn't behaving the way you expected. And because you're writing prototypes, you can chuck the code away, but you've got this corpus of tests that you can use to the next prototype to prove you're still doing the right things. Right? If you write tests and you write a prototype and you chuck the prototype away, you have thrown every piece of knowledge you have out the door. You've got to start again. Yeah, so there, I think I've just said this. The fearlessly refactor, and I'll touch again on this in a second, but this is what you're trying to do. As a developer, as a 10x developer, you've got to understand the code is not the most important aspect. Yes, it's the thing that delivers value, but it's interim, it changes, it expands, it gets bigger, it gets smaller. The tests are the embodiment of the value that you deliver. And the better the test, the more secure you can be in changing the code. Because you have this mold that says, if this mold doesn't fit, something's wrong. Without that relationship, you can't refactor fearlessly and relentlessly. Right? So, where do we get to? So, 10x developers are much less this fighting monsters but actually using hoverboards, using the tech they've got, understanding the tech and making use of it. They're more Ironman than Superman. These aren't inbuilt skills, though some of these 10x developers may naturally like what they do. Right? There may be some natural thing there, but mostly it's learnt behavior. It's a scientific thought process. So much more about building an Ironman suit than trying to become Superman. Which of these is possible? So a 10x developer, right, delivers high quality code, right, on time, right, and when that means only what it does. They don't add extra features because it's fun. They're not here for fun. They're here to get the value that's been asked them out the door. So don't add more. Just do what you need to do, right? And 10x developers understand that the code is ephemeral. It changes. The code you have today is not the code you have tomorrow. It's a line different. It's 100 lines different. It's 1,000 lines different. It's been chucked out with something new. It changes, right? But it's the tests that prove that the code does what you expect it to, that are your assets. And the other thing they've learned is they can't do this on their own. They have to do it with the team. Because 10x developers understand that by enabling the team to do these things, everybody benefits. They benefit because they're not trying to fix other people's problems. They're getting the team together to focus on delivering value. Okay? Guess what? This is hard. I can see you going, yeah, I like the idea, but I don't know how to do it. Right? And I get it. It's hard. It is hard to get into this mindset. Right? There are lots of guidelines out there. They're not very particularly on their skills. But I've got, you want skills, you want to learn skills. You don't want to go to Stack Overflow. You want knowledge, not hearsay. You want facts over feelings. You want evidence over emotion. Right? Teamwork over tantrums. I like that one. But you can see that there are being scientific and thoughtful in what you do as a team gives you enormous values because you're not going back over old ground because you forgot to run that test or things broke or deployments failed because you didn't understand the detail. Now, it's really hard to balance all the demands that people have of you. So one of the characteristics you'll see is nothing big, which is good because we're all in microservices, we're all in agile, we're all talking about delivering small units of value, and that works really well. So one tenet is always nothing big, because it's all about productivity. And 10x engineers are productive because they have clarity of purpose. They're looking at this and going, what do I have to do to make this happen? What's the least I have to do to deliver the value, right? Right, so one thing at a time, nothing big. Pick the thing, pick whatever it is, write a test case, build a prototype, whatever it is. What's the one thing you could do that reduces uncertainty, that takes the risk away? Do that next. Do that next. Prioritize that way. Don't prioritize on business value as this bring loads of money in. You've got to have that view, of course. But you will ultimately get that faster if you look at these things and you go, what gets me more knowledge and reduces risk and improves clarity? Do that next. Do that next. Do that next. Right? So when you're delivering a new feature, break it down and look at it and go, what bits do I not understand? Okay, let's do something to fix that. How do I learn something new about that piece? Right? And sometimes that's you do on your own, sometimes that's you do with the team. But you get the idea that what you're trying to do is reduce uncertainty, right? And get clarity. Small wins. 10x developers are productive because they're always prepared to take risks. And that doesn't mean, psychologically, yeah, I can take a risk. No, it means my environment is set up so we can experiment. How do I try this out in a safe manner, right? So that's thinking ahead. That means working out what you don't know and trying to fix that, right? It's looking at the longer picture and going, what do I need now that will make life better for my future self? What reduces my uncertainty now will be good for tomorrow, right? And it always comes back to the code is the means to an end. Do not get emotionally attached to the code you write. It's not going to be, it's going to change tomorrow. Don't worry about that. Think of the value you deliver and think about how you make that happen, right? Working to mitigate, reduce risk. That's what you're trying to do. What's the one thing I can do that will mean we have a better picture for tomorrow? Because if I've got that, I can take risks. Because the more knowledge I have, the more safety nets I have, the more I can explore. And if the more I can explore, the more we can try out these ideas of producing more value for the business because we have that base. So these guys think differently about everything, right? And I'm going to show you one example. So I'm going to go back to the testing thing. 10x developers write lots of tests because they're trying to create this shell. They don't care about code coverage. That's not what's the important bit here. The important bit is building up this support layer, this embodiment of their understanding in tests. Right? Because once you've got that, you can refactor mercilessly. You can change things and know you're going to catch the issues. Because that test suite is the most important thing that you create. Right? And as developers, we're going, but that's somebody else's job. Well, maybe it is, but maybe you go work with them. Or maybe you write some tests yourself, right? And the reason that we often think that it's somebody else's problem is because of the way that we structure teams. So the way that normally it happens is there's some idea of grouping. So I've got people write unit tests, and then I have developers do things, unit testing, I have integration teams, we have deployment teams, whatever, loads of different teams. And the idea, of course, is that the longer it takes to find the bug, the more expensive it is because of all the consequences of how hard it is to debug. Right? So we tend to do this sort of weird segregation, and it doesn't make any sense. What a 10x developer does is something completely different. The way that they think about testing is about something to do with how quickly does the test run? How much knowledge do I need to have to run that test? If the test is really, really quick, and I don't need domain knowledge, I don't have to set up databases and things to run it, then give it to the developer who's writing code. Make it a unit test, because it's quick and he gets feedback. If it takes a very long time to run, then it will slow him down, so don't do that. But if it also needs lots of domain knowledge, that you're asking a developer to set up all sorts of complicated systems, that's not their job, right? You want to push the tests that are easy to run and have little domain knowledge to the developer down here, and then you back off based on domain knowledge needed and how long it takes, right? That's how they think about this. This is how they think about lots of things. Where's the value? Why do we do it the way we do? What do we get out of it by doing it that way? And the answer is often it's just what we inherited. 10x developers will say, look at the value that you get from your behavior and modify it. And as you can see, that's not something you can do on your own. That requires other teams to be involved. Right? In general, a 10x developer is going to be looking for feedback everywhere, right? There's wherever it is. You always have the opportunity to get feedback about your actions. And so they're always looking for that. How well did that work? How long did the build take? Can we make it faster? Do we have flaky tests? What can we do about it? What do our customers think about stuff? Getting feedback, they want to know, but they want it crisp, clear. Right? They want loads and loads of feedback because it's actionable. Right? Now, the other thing you'll hear them do is, if you have a backlog, prune it, get rid of it. Right? One of the things that you see developers like to do is they like to hold on to issues. They have an issue tracking system, and there are issues that are 1,000 days old or whatever, because maybe we'll get round to fixing it. Chuck it away. It's never going to happen. If it's important, it'll come back, because you're getting feedback about what's important. Right? And also, start to train the people who are giving you feedback to give you valuable feedback. Like, I just got back from vacation and the tests are failing. Well, some are. Portugal was nice. We've all had weird things like that in issues where somebody goes, there's something wrong. And as a developer, you have to go and work through and figure out what the problem is. So 10x developers take time to work out what they want and then start educating the raisers to give back quality feedback. how do I get the problem? Because the developer is the most important element in terms of value, in terms of productivity here, because whatever happens, it comes back to somebody writing code. So if a developer is spending all his time debugging problems, then that's not good. And if it requires setting up big, complicated things, that's not good, right? Which is why you want to be able to find the problems with the smallest tests you can get. And 10x developers will focus on that. That was a big problem. What test should I have written to make sure that I catch it tomorrow on my desk? That's how they think. Well, so feedback, yeah. The interesting thing is feedback, those conversations that you're having with the testers and with your management, the idea of communicating and talking about clarity means that you all start to work together better because you're beginning to understand what each of you needs to have happen and why. Focusing everybody together on this makes such a difference. So there's tons and tons of times is that if you get feedback right and you get people communicating right, whether it's via Slack or issues or whatever, the team comes together and moves forward faster than they would have done before because they're all firing together, right? Just so much like 10x developers. So other things. 10x developers take control of their environment. Right? And what does that mean? Well, that means they look at the tools they use and they build their toolbox. They go, these are the tools I'm going to use. And when I have a tool, I'm going to know it well. Often developers will, if you talk about what developers have in terms of tooling, it can be quite complicated. This is the CNCF cloud native landscape. If you've done anything to do with cloud, you will have used a tool that's somewhere on here, and possibly on the page over there or the page down below. Right? Thousands of tools. So which ones do you pick? Well, that's your choice. That's your process. But what 10x developers will do is very much like what the CNCF have been doing for us now, is to create their own little roadmap of here are the tools that I am going to use to get this job done. 10x developers will tell you that bringing a new tool in, without you being able to demonstrate the real solid value it's going to bring, is a bad idea. Because the tools aren't important, productivity is. And if the tools are getting in the way, look at changing them. But if the tools aren't getting in the way, become expert in them and make the best use of them. Right? And so they build this whole experience. It might be plugins in an IDE. It might be, a bunch of GitHub Actions, you name it. It's like, this is what I use. And I know how they work because knowledge brings clarity and clarity brings productivity. Right? So 10x developers are these craftsmen. They build these spaces for themselves. They build these pipelines. They build these structures to help themselves. And they work with other people towards common goals. Right? Because they understand a whole bunch of things, like poor understanding of tools bites you every time. Right? So they try to become the master. They want to become that master metalworker or that master stonemason because they understand they can get more done by being masters of a smaller subset of tools than just using whatever they can find by going to Google. Right? You won't hear 10x developers say, I thought I was using the tool correctly. I didn't realize what the default setting was. I trusted the tool to do the right thing. These are comments that I've had talking to people about security issues. But it's very common that we use tools without understanding them. We just use it for the thing because we went to Stack Overflow or Google and they said, oh, somebody said, just do this. And the problem with that is you have no idea what that tool's going to do, what else it can do. So even apart from a security point of view, stupid things happen because you didn't understand the tool. 10x developers invest time in the tool. Right. So, being a great developer, much more about building your own Ironman suit, understanding how to do that, then assuming this is all about innate behavior and abilities, it's not like that at all. It is about putting these things together. But it is about being a team worker, a team player, and understanding that bringing the whole team together, the whole team up, makes significant difference to productivity. It really does. You get people happier because they're less angry with each other because they're not communicating properly, and they get good throughput. What's not okay? So, I want to take a diversion here now because I need to explain to you something that's happening that means that you need to do this now, right? Because this idea of thinking about how you do development, the process of looking at your process is going to be coming to all of us. So now is a good time to start rethinking about how you do development. So a couple of years ago, US government said, hey, you know this cybercrime thing? We're going to put some laws in place that says it's going to be your problem, Mr. Customer or Mr. Supplier to the US government. And then the EU recently have put another act out that says if you ship software, if your company ships software and it's got known vulnerabilities in it, somebody in that company could be criminally liable for that to happen. So US government we're making people responsible for shipping good software with high security posture. EU's doing the same. UK's just done it. Australia's just joined in as well. The simple fact is that there is now a turning point has happened. And most of the governments are beginning to understand to deal with their cybersecurity woes, they need the producers of software, that's us, to step up and produce higher quality software as far as security is concerned. This is a quote from Brian Fox, who's Sonatype's founder and my boss. But think of it like this. If you drive something and it has safety features, and the provider of that car knowingly knew that those features weren't working, they'd get sued, or they get taken and put in jail. But software business has not been like that. So what they're doing is forcing us to look at how we produce software, because we will not be allowed much longer to ship software that does not have good security posture. Right? And in case you think that it's not particularly important, so Java developers in the room? Okay, most of you. Oh, that's cool. Okay. Most of you, who's learned of Log4j? Okay. Many of you spent your, what year it was? December, looking off, trying to fix this stuff. Yeah, right. So this little chart, which is hard to see, I've got a bigger picture. This is the thing that really changed the government's view, all the government's view, because Log4j, the worst vulnerability ever, doesn't matter if it's been Java, worst vulnerability today. What are we, 2 years down? 33% of the downloads from Maven Central, 33%, this changes on a daily basis, but around that number, are for vulnerable versions. So that means somewhere our development processes are downloading vulnerable code, which has this Log4j vulnerability in it. It's still happening now. This was the last piece. I was in a meeting in December in Washington, and it was all very much, this demonstrates that developers can't do what we want them to do, and we're going to have to force them to do it. Nobody wants to do that, but as you'd imagine, that's what happens if we don't fix it ourselves. And there's a lot of people in the industry, lots of names of groups and foundations, government organizations that are all getting together to go, this has to happen. How do we make it happen? And a lot of it distills into chores for us as developers. So, I'll read out some of the words. So things like must have an S-bomb. Anybody know what an S-bomb is? No? Okay, right. So an S-bomb is a bill of materials. It's got a list on it which says, here's the contents of this thing I've given you. Bill of materials are used all over the world in all industries. It's coming to software. So when I make some software available to you, I will have a list, a digitally signed list that says, these are all the contents of my of the thing you're downloading from me. Here's all the details. Right? And it has ramifications to itself, but that's just one extra chore for you. And then the other ones, like use an automatic supply chain process. One of the things that's been noted is that delivery processes from code to cloud, if human beings are involved in pressing buttons and moving files around, that's a place where vulnerabilities strike. Things get hacked. And so the answer is none of that. From now on, whenever this clock starts hitting you, is you press a button and it goes to deployment. People can get involved in terms of making decisions, but they can't affect the code that flows. Right? Other things, evidence of software integrity. Evidence, good word. Demonstrate regular audit processes. Prove to me that you're in control of your build processes. Prove to me that your developers understand these things. Prove to me that you use these things. Demonstration, audit, evidence, integrity. Right? Has evidence of an automatic vulnerability check process. Prove to me that you're not shipping bad code. Prove to me that you're doing these things. Right? Has a vulnerability disclosure program. That means if somebody finds a bug, a vulnerability in your code, they know how to report it. You'd be surprised at how hard it is to report vulnerabilities to companies who are producing software. Right? Evidence of the provenance of all software used. The provenance. So not just my cake has got eggs and milk in it. My cake has got eggs that came from this farm and on this date and from this chicken, right? Which was raised here by these people who used this corn to feed it. That's where we're getting. This long, long chain, we're moving towards those sorts of environments. Now, we're right at the beginning, so it's not going to be that long to start off with, but you can see the consequences to us as developers. Right? Demonstrate strong controls. So demonstration, audits, automation, integrity, evidence. It's all about how we develop software. And this is just a high-level summary. There's a lot more behind all this. So this takes us into this part of 10x developers are going to look at that and go, there are things we can do. Because a lot of what they're talking, a lot of what's on this list, I think, is not actually too onerous if you built it in from the beginning. If you have a process that you've built, if you understand that you want feedback, if you understand that you need checks and balances, because so much of this is about feedback, but it's being presented as a big stick that's going to come down to all of us, right? Everybody's going to get something, whether it's open source project you use that now has to do this, right? Which means that they won't release as often because they've got lots of work to do, or maybe maybe some of the open source projects out there will stop shipping their code because this is too much hard work. And in which case you're going to find yourself going, okay, we've now got a hole because I've got a vulnerability for this thing. It's never going to get fixed because the developers decide to stop. I've got to write some more code to fill it in. Right? These are the things that are coming towards us. So the 10x developer here isn't 10x to move you up to this amazing new level. Part of this 10x is you have to start looking like this now because this is coming our way. Right, what else we got? So things we could do, right? Well, it turns out, from a security point of view, other than looking at your build processes, there's one thing you could do, right? that would make a big difference, and your company would love you for it if you could figure out how to make it happen. Yeah, I showed you the Log4j thing. It turns out that for any vulnerability that is out there, there's usually a fix. Right? It's almost always, once a vulnerability is published, there's a fix. So it isn't about fixes being available, it's about how good we are at getting that fix into the system. Right? So you can see it says unavoidable vulnerabilities. Most of the problems that we have from a security point of view are avoidable. There was already a fix. We just didn't have the wherewithal. So by working towards things like, how do I make this happen? How do I automate my processes so that I can update very fast? Right? That one step will go an enormous way to help with the other things you're going to be asked to do. Because by actually focusing on the important bit, the bit that a 10x developer would say, well, let's fix this, because then we're safe, and we have automation, so we get feedback. Automation lets you produce the information that other people are asking for. Really simple thing, conceptually. Now, I know we're all going to say, yeah, we have really hard build systems and things like that. Fine, but that's the challenge for you. But this thing is being shown to make a big difference. There are others. You can look at it from the other point of view and go, from now on, as a 10x developer, put some more thought into your choices. When you choose something, don't choose it because it's just got a feature. That's great. It does this. I have a left pad thing. It does a great thing. Well, that's not good enough anymore. It's not about features. It's about what's the quality of that code that you're choosing. Should you pick the latest version? And everyone's going, oh, yeah, I should always pick the latest version. Well, not always, because latest versions, any version of code that you produce, you consume, has its own dependencies, yes? It's not just the one you pick, it's the one it drags in. So when you pick the latest, you get whatever it's chosen. And sometimes it's chosen something that's got a vulnerability in it. And if you'd picked the version before, maybe that wasn't there. And there are tools coming out. We've got some tools coming out that can help you make those sorts of decisions. The point is, you have to start thinking differently about how you do this, and not going for the latest. You have to think about the consequences, right? Because honestly, we know from the facts that we've got that so much time gets wasted on this anyway. We pick something, and then it turns out to have a bug or a feature or a vulnerability. So we go back and try it again, right? And actually, we're getting better at being able to tell you that if you just didn't pick the latest, but you picked this version, you'd be so much more productive because you wouldn't have a churn. Right? But the point is, you have to think like this. Right? And there are all these tools coming out to help you think like that. This isn't just you going, okay, is this software any good? It is about quantification. And so you can go to Maven Central. We're putting out our own safety ratings. We're beginning to work out what the right rules are, but it will require you to understand what's being assessed and understand the value to your business of picking the right version, which doesn't always mean the latest one, okay? And funnily, as part of this process, we've been doing an enormous amount of analysis on behavior. So because we run Maven Central, we can see the download behavior. And that gives us great insights. So for instance, one of the things we can see is that people may download a particular version of something and the day after move to another version. And we can see those patterns. If we can see those patterns, we can share them with you. Because the chances are that if the crowd uses something, picks something on day one, and on day two picks something else, and on day three picks something else, there's something wrong. And maybe to do with a vulnerability or breaking change or whatever. But we're beginning to understand that, and that information is turning up on Maven Central. So as a Java developer, you can make use of it. But we're also doing it not just with the downloads, but with the GitHub repos as well. Where's the source code? We look at the behavior of those open source projects as well, because we want to give you information about whether this is a good choice. Because in the long run, you need to do this, right? This is part of what's coming down, right? And when we looked at behavior, and we said, what is it that makes a good open source project? We have a bunch of classifications, right? And interestingly, more than anything is, when you start looking at things that make the biggest difference, they're good software engineering practices. They're the sorts of things a 10x developer would tell you, that's what you should do. You know what the biggest one is? The biggest thing that makes a difference is code review. Team working together, looking at what you've written, something which we all should do, but not everybody does. But projects that do code reviews have substantially less likelihood of having vulnerabilities in because they're working together. They're demonstrating through these little indicators just how good they are as a development team. They are being 10x developers. And you might go, from a security point of view, you may go, no, we're not allowed to do security. Management says we have to deliver value, write code, not worry about fixing bugs. Fixing security bugs. And I get that. But we have a bunch of research that we can show that says, actually, it's not the greatest chart, but the way to read this is, we looked at the performance of development teams, a bunch of studies, not just with Sonotype, but others, that says, what do you focus on? Do you focus on productivity? Do you focus on security? And those that said they focused on productivity, well, those that said neither, or obviously down here, low performers, what drives you? I have no idea. We just write code. But if you focus on making sure you're focused on productivity, then, okay, you're here, right? You're in this space. If you focus on security, we have everything we need to get vulnerabilities patched, then you tend to be in this space. But it turns out that the highest performers, the teams that were able to most reliably produce high quality code consistently and in a secure manner, did both. They looked at security and they looked at productivity and they went, we have to deal with both of those. Right? So we have a whole bunch of evidence that says it isn't about making a choice between am I secure or am I productive. The fact is that by doing both together, you can achieve more, which is a fabulous result if you think about it, because it means that you can say to your management, look, if we do these things together, we're going to be even better and we're going to be secure. This chart, the little chart here says the things that the governments are asking of us, which is delivering code that is more secure, that's a big ask. Right? The challenge for us is, how do we do that? Well, you saw the list of things they're going to force us to do. How do we automate the processes that we're using in such a way that we can give them what they want? Because weirdly, governments don't care about productivity. In this case, they just want security. You care about productivity. So by bringing these things together, by looking at how you produce software, looking at the automation processes, adding in the feedback. There's lots of things out there I can talk about. So Gradle, I've done this talk a couple of times with some guys from Gradle. Gradle have a thing called Developer Productivity Engineering, DPE, which is the science of this. And the idea is, by looking at how you work and measuring it, you can get the feedback you need. By working together, by building those relationships with teams towards common goals, by talking together about how tests work and how development works, and you get to the clarity that you want, right? You get productivity. In all these ways, by looking at what 10x developers do, what 10x developers do, they show us that by following these sorts of rules, we can achieve more productivity, but in this new world of security, we can also be more secure. So at the end of the day, here's a bunch of rules. Let's talk about them. Great developer delivers high quality code on time that only does what is necessary. So you don't do lots of stuff, you focus the important. Right? Strives to replace uncertainty with fact, whether it's tools, codes, whatever. How do I get clarity? How do I get facts? Because facts let me do things. Right? And then focuses on incremental value, not big bang changes, because incremental value, incremental changes are safer, reduces risk, and with the right test cases, you know that you're not breaking things. You can make radical changes in small ways. 10x developers, great developers, are team players because you can't get there without having these other people involved. You can't get there without the testers involved. You can't get without the managers involved. You can't get there without performance involved. Right? You need to have those conversations, and you focus it on facts and evidence and bringing people together and clarity. Right? That's it. But lastly, of course, rule 5, know when and how to break all these rules. Because they look at the rules like we should do. These aren't rules as in this is what you should do under all circumstances. It's understanding what you're trying to achieve, and then when it doesn't work, I don't know, change your mind and go do something else. And you're in a great place because you're here. There's a bunch of stuff I touched on. There's a whole bunch of stuff to go learn. Maybe I've given you some ideas to go learn about something else. Right? But anyway, thank you much for your time. I have a few minutes left, so I'll say thank you, and I'll sit down here for any questions.